have catastrophic failure here on this tree. Quercus agrifolia, California live oak. This whole trunk has split off from the main central lead. The tree emerges as a triple trunk specimen, and then this one compounds about 7 or 8 feet up into a secondary lateral leader, and it's massive. You can see the diameter of this trunk. It's like a whole tree all by itself, this one limb. This tree has peeled open and failed and settled onto the roof of this house. So it's a tremendous burden and load on that roof. Our only option is to dismantle this all the way back and then finally make a dismantling cut here at the trunk, and then manage a very, very large wound on the side of the tree. This main stem here of the triple trunker lost at least half of its foliage and limbs and scaffold and structure in this failure. Actually, the house kept the tree from going all the way down. It looks like this failure would have come all the way through and the whole structure would have collapsed. But it's landed on the house next door and it's landed on this house and just held it right there. This is a very careful dismantling job from all the extended cantilever material first and working the way back to dismantle this back to the main stem. Again, we have an enormous excision from the tree. To save the tree, we're going to have to take off this whole break. No way to reculture this. So it's going to have to come all the way back to here. An enormous excision and a wound that we'll have to treat and take care of for decades, really. This is a sad situation here for both the tree and the building. This is applying a tremendous amount of load to the building, so this has got to be dismantled and get this burden off the building before it collapses it. The fact that this is impounded in a cable attach point here, indicates this was cabled a long, long time ago. The tree has probably grown tremendously over the years, and so this is one of our failure points. One could say this cable is awfully light for a tree of this massiveness. Here we can see that the screw eye cabling point pulled out. This method can't be counted on for full strength. If the wood decays around the screw eye anchor point, it could easily be pulled out. The screw eye is simply not a high enough tensile attachment to support the tree's full weight. We can see this cable is broken. It actually has rusted or broken through some time ago, because we can see the end of this is rusty. So this has broken some time ago. This tree just went down. So if this cable were broken, we would see fresh steel there at the break. If the tree had been inspected, this could have been discovered and recabling could have been accomplished. If we could have just been here in time, we could have saved this enormous failure on the tree. They have wrapped around the trunk with the cabling, and this can eventually tourniquet the limb's circulation. A band or a cable around a trunk will eventually become embedded in the bark. It can tourniquet the circulation in at least a portion of the limb, and sometimes all the way around the limb. The circulation can be compromised. Trees can become dependent on cabling. Once a lateral limb has been stabilized by a cable, that limb can then greatly elongate because it feels the support of that cable. It's almost as though that cable point is right at the trunk, at the main stem. So we don't get the flexure, the movement, the elongation and compression of cells, less deposition of cambium and tissue in that limb. The tree can produce these huge long cantilevers beyond the cabling. And so this is why cabling should be inspected every year after it's been installed, and also the canopy should probably be managed and controlled for span and weight and cantilever every year or every other year, given some attention to make sure everything is doing fine. This lateral limb has emerged from one of the main stems, is wrapped around and come up and laid over another limb. It has become dependent on it. Once the tree has placed load on an associated limb, it may be that this portion of the limb will cease to thicken. It's no longer receiving the compression and elongation of cells to the movement of the limb, and many times a limb will then cease to expand in girth. And from this point on out, the limb can greatly elongate because the load, the weight is being carried here on this underslung limb. And so this laying here like this, the limb then can greatly elongate without being able to support or carry its own weight. So we've had a kind of a buildup of this kind of a scenario in the tree to the point that it has resulted in a failure. A combination of good management practices definitely could have saved this tree from this huge failure. Pruning could have lightened the canopy's cantilever and span. We have a tremendous amount of foliage going to the north. No counterbalancing loads for the tree. All that mass, all that cantilever finally resulted in the tree's failure. So the combination of the massive long laterals going to the north, the tremendous growth this year, we had a big growth year with 30 inches of rainfall, plus the faulty and substandard cabling, we had the tree sort of set up in a perfect storm for failure. We hope to save the tree by recabling correctly, removing the failed limb, and relieving as many as possible of these old impingements which have occurred over years. Correct management practices could have had this tree smiling still, but it's in big trouble now, that's for sure.